always good to be part of ATA, especially for the 12th ATA Annual Forum. And my heart is always with the continent of Africa. Don't ask me why. I had a lot of reasons to say that. Well, without wasting much time, let me get straight away into the topic. Role of inclusiveness, balance and diversity, church and state. I would like to say a big thank you to our brother, Pastor David Odiambo, for giving me a complete background on church and state. So I don't have to go in deep because you have told everything what I need to say. Well, I've been looking at it from this particular question. How should the church relate to members who are also elected public officials? This is one of your guiding questions for this particular forum. So I have taken this question and have looked into from a theoretical perspective, especially from a common man's view. I'm not a theologian, not a biblical scholar to bring in cosmos or any other terminologies into it, but thank you for bringing that cosmos because the presentation is related with how you have viewed the particular terminology in the book of John. Benjamin Solomon, called as Ben Carson. As you all know about him and his recent involvement in politics and also what he is right now in the government. As you all know, he was an American neurosurgeon, he is an author, and called as a politician in the 17th, as a part of the 17th and current United States Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under the Trump administration. Now, what he has to do with what we are looking at, I'm going to tell a few things about the view of our church about him. Now, the Adventist Church has a long-lasting position of not supporting or opposing any candidate for elected office. I'm just giving you a general view. This position is based both on our historical position of separation of church and state and the applicable federal law relating to the church tax-exempt status. So our church falls into a category that we are exempted from tax. In that position, we are not allowed, we are not supposed to be in favor of one particular political party. It doesn't mean we cannot be involved in any political activity. However, we cannot promote a particular political party. And also, Ted Wilson reminds each one of the church members, pastors, and the administrators of the church's official position on the separation of church and state. Now, it goes on to say, Adventists should take civic responsibility seriously. We should participate in the voting process available to us when it is possible to do so in good conscience and should share the responsibility of building our communities. Adventists should not, however, become preoccupied with politics or utilize the pulpit or our publications to advance political theories. Now, having said that, this is based on a particular statement about the concept of church and state. The Seventh-day Adventist Church values Dr. Carson as we do all members. However, it is important for the church to maintain its long-standing historical support for the separation of church and state by not endorsing or opposing any candidate. Now, with this background, let me take you to the idea of church and state. Now, as I said, Pastor Odiamba has given enough background, so I will not be getting into the details of it. However, let me start from the Martin Luther period. You all know about the Protestant Reformation. Now, Martin Luther articulated the doctrine of two kingdoms. Kingdom of religion as we follow, and the kingdom of state, the government separately over there. Now, this was a Protestant Reformation because of the earlier Roman concept of putting it together and ruling over people. He wanted to break that down and brought in this particular doctrine. Followed by this, and taking out from here, is the next one called as Radical Reformation. As you see, Radical Reformation, it is otherwise called as Anabaptist. They took Luther's ideas into a new direction. This is basically from the writings of Michael Slater, who agreed with Luther that there are two kingdoms. However, he said we should be completely separated, not participating in both the kingdoms. You can be part of one of the kingdom. So if you are part of the religion, you are not supposed to go and vote for the political parties and others. Likewise, the next one which came up was the social contract. This is by John Locke. Now, what did John Locke talk about the social contract over here is about the government lacked authority in the realm of individual conscience, as this was something rational people could seek the government for it or others to control. What it means to say is, we all are individual and we have our own conscience, and government has no control over our individual conscience. Hence, we have our right to exercise our individual conscience in terms of being part of one of that kingdom. And this leads back into the Western world of the state of America, 1776 to 1761. There were the American Revolutionary War. Now, during which there were many changes, and also people rose up against the English people over there in that country. Now, if you want to see on that, I would like to read from this document of separation of church and state. It says that Thomas Jefferson, he said this to King George V. He said, "We hold the truth to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Now, in order to gain these rights, he said, we do not want to be part of this rule where King George V calls for allegiance to the government, irrespective of your worldview in terms of following up with the religion. So we want it to be separate because we hold on to our own rights. We have our own rights to exercise. And this was also based on the Puritan theology. Now, Puritan theology is basically the Americans who wanted to purify themselves, whom they felt that they were corrupted by the church, especially when the Britishers were colonizing the Americans and ruling over them, and felt that they have been corrupted. Now they want to purify, and they come out of it, and they took a stand in having a distinction of the church and state. However, they emphasized on establishment. They said the government need to establish a religion for what they are ruling. And secondly, followed by this was the political philosophy of civic republicanism. Now, what do you mean by this political philosophy of civic republicanism? It says the practice of virtue with the presence of freedom and the common good of the society. Every individual has the right to practice their virtue of goodness for the humanity or for the society based on their individual belief. Lastly, the liberal enlightenment philosophy. Now, the liberal enlightenment philosophy is also presenting on the church and the state in terms of the tolerance of Protestantism alone, because the Catholics and the atheists were too dangerous at that time. So they wanted to come up with being more liberal in terms of holding on to the Protestants' belief. Now, John Locke also contributed in this terms of idea of having a belief over the Protestantism and being a little bit vigilant against the dangerous concepts of Catholics and atheists. However, in this liberal enlightenment philosophy, they also emphasize there should be a consideration for having an inclusive, having a balance, having a diverse acceptance of the belief in the church and state. Now, I would like to take you to the next concept of this role of inclusiveness, role of balance, and the role of diversity in terms of leadership. How can we handle it in a church? And how did they handle it in those days? And how is our church handling it? For us to understand that, we will have a secular worldview first by understanding it in a general perspective. In a general leadership concept, we see that leadership taps the resources of many voices to make systems and organizations effective, transparent, inclusive, and fair. Now, this is from a business perspective. In order for you to have a good leadership, you need to take the resources of many voices so that it can build up. Secondly, there is no one size fits all. We as Seventh-day Adventists, we cannot proclaim that this is how it needs to fit the whole world's problem. Now, I am talking from a general perspective. This is how the secular worldview considers how the church looks at it. The secular worldview is, you as Seventh-day Adventist church, you have a unique belief. However, this is not the only way you can settle the broken world. There has to be different elements of the view which can be put together, which can solve the situation. So there is no one size that fits all. Passive and active representation. There should be passive and active representation of different, diverse, different views of different perspectives and belief system. Then only we can have a good leadership. And also, it says, in order to have inclusive, balance, and diverse concept put together for leadership, it is considered to be a potential valuable resource. Lastly, there are 6 signature traits for this inclusive leadership. If you see over here in this picture, you see it starts with the commitment, then courage, cognizance, curiosity, cultural intelligence, and collaboration. What does it mean by that? The first trait in order to have the inclusive leadership is to be committed to diversity and inclusion, because to align with personal values is to show some care. And second one is courage. It is to challenge the status quo and to be humble about the strength and weaknesses. The third one, cognizance of bias. It is about the leaders should be mindful of personal and organizational blind spots so that it can help self-regulate, help ensure fair play. The fourth one is the curiosity. It is about to have an open mindset, a desire to understand how others view and experience the world, and tolerance for ambiguity. Fifthly, culturally intelligent. The leaders need to be confident and effective in cross-cultural interactions. And lastly, collaborative. This is to empower individuals as well as create and leverage the thinking of diverse groups. Now these are the traits, 6 traits that is part of inclusive leadership. Now in terms of our church leadership, let me run fast as the indicator has been shown to me for the less timing I have. There are different ways in which the church denomination looks at these three factors into their leadership. Presbyterian polity, it says its provision for inclusiveness is provided for bringing all types of people into the church. When I say all types of people, people involved in various work, including the politicians and people in the government. And second, the Latter-day Saints, they said there should be no question that diversity, love, inclusion, hope, and personal responsibility would describe a Christ-centered faith. It is always part of it. The Catholic leadership, it is authoritative, yet it is inclusive. Now you may be questioning this. I'm not talking this in terms of the historical background, but at present, the new Pope has come up with this particular concept. And he admitted in his early years that though we are authoritative, we are considering it to be more inclusive. And he started doing various aspects. By the way, I'm not promoting what the Pope has said, but this is the concept. This is the fact that he has released on behalf of Catholic leadership. Next, Baptist, it is to empower uniqueness of God's gift, so it should be inclusive. Then the Methodist, young to reform, what they mean by saying is to bring in more values and more skills and talents into the church is by being inclusive and especially considering the young people to transform the church. Now, why did I emphasize on that? Because even Adventist church, sometimes we believe in that. We believe in being diverse and inclusive, and also strong personal and collective unity with the church is important. But there is a challenge. Quarantine Pippin, in one of his paper, he strongly argues about this egalitarian philosophy. How we need to be very careful with that and how it is seductive in nature. What does it mean by that? We as Adventist church, many a times we would like to get more and more people involved in church leadership without considering the spiritual leadership. We say, oh, he is talented in this particular area, let us keep him in our church so that it can attract more people to come to church. He is very good in getting the crowd together. He should be the right person for standing up for maybe his inspiration or something over there. And Pippin clearly says that be careful of that. When you are going to appoint, even among the church, now I'm not talking about the politics and governance outside, I'm talking about it inside. We need to be very careful of how we appoint leaders, because we need to consider the spiritual leadership, not just the talents and skill. And that is not going to be inclusive for our church, because that is well backed by egalitarian philosophy. Now, just for you to know, there are many Adventists who also play a role in the government. They are also government officials. I have a list of them, so let me run down very fast. If you see someone whom you know, be happy about them. Now, these are people who are in the government sectors all over the world. So I do have a list of people here. Now, I did not highlight anything in red which is not from Africa. So there are few people from Africa who is considered to be in a top political position and part of the governance. So if you see someone from your place, okay, that's good that they are holding such a high post in the government. Especially this is only about the politics. Okay. Well, I have a list of 30 of them who are holding a very high position in the government and still being an Adventist. Now, what is the biblical basis about this national politics and governance? To be subject to the government unless it asks you to disobey God. And you have the following biblical references that support this view. And also to grant proper honor to those in authority. And to do right and cooperate with the government authorities whenever possible. To pay taxes. I think Adventists, we don't need to pay. Is that so? We don't come into that area, right? Because we come under the lower, maybe poverty area. So we may not be able to pay taxes. Okay, those who are into that line, you have to pay tax. To pray for government authorities. To evangelize and disciple government leaders when possible. To be informed and vote for candidates and issues which will, to the best degree possible, uphold God's purposes for the government. This is according to Cole in 2013. He comes up with these 7 areas, the biblical basis for which we need to be involved with the politics and governance. How about the church view? Church remains neutral in response in terms of Seventh-day Adventist Church. It maintains a long-lasting neutral position on the candidates running for elected offices. And Ted Wilson, President of General Conference of Seventh-day Adventist, spoke at the event and encouraged the leaders to remain motivated by their faith and when making decisions. This even happened in 2015, where the politicians who felt that they are isolated, they came together and they formed an association. And this is when Elder Ted Wilson appreciated their participation and to help them remain motivated. He also said, you are the Esthers, the Josephs, the Daniels of our world. These are the direct statements of Elder Ted Wilson about them. And also he said that to stand tall as ambassadors for Christ. These men and women need our support and our prayer. They are the first and forefront, our brothers and sisters, but they are also called to represent Christ's kingdom and His values within often difficult and sensitive circumstances. So, Adventists should not, however, become preoccupied with politics to utilize a pulpit or publication to advance political theories. However, those who are there in it, we need to be with them in terms of supporting them for making it right for our church. The statement of Ellen White, she said, we are not to vote for men that use their influence to repress religious liberty, for if we do, we are partakers with them of the sins which they commit while in office. We cannot with safety take part in any political scheme, she said. Christians will not wear political badges. But this is not to the extreme, to a view of not taking part in political work, but also to be very careful or mindful of what we need to do. Now, going a little faster about the church and state in the context of Africa, what is happening from the cases recorded from South Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Rwanda, and also I would like to add Tanzania into it, one of the literature that included it. We say we neglect the calling of the church to serve. We as Adventist Church, we also have a part to play. However, we do neglect. Now, dealing with legal charges. Now, recently there were 2 cases against our church pastors from Rwanda being involved in genocide. And later on, our world leaders have to be involved in settling the issue. Reconciliation is done by being involved in the political context over there. Third, ecumenical issue. We do not know where to draw a line, but Ellen White was very clear, and Ted Wilson supports the view in a statement by saying that you need to be part of considering the other, the churches or other denominations leaders in terms of dealing with issues which are against the church. However, it is not necessary to be part of the council. So in that way, our church draws a very good line that it is not part of the ecumenical council. However, it does support by having a good fraternity with the people or representatives from other denominations. Establishment instead of exercise of religion. Lastly, civil liberty and human rights. Now, this is an issue of humanism coming into play. Sometimes we are wavered in applying what type of philosophical ideas that we hold on. And addressing the issues, individuals victimized for church and state principle, role of church leadership in catering to the officials for influences in the government, reverse political influence on church leadership, balancing out ecumenism, compromising God's principles for the political correctness. These are the main issues out of many other issues that I have seen it in the context of Africa, where there are challenges, there are issues that needs to be addressed in the continent of Africa in terms of politics and governance. Now, some of the recommendations that I bring forward relating to what needs to be done as a church member, as a common man, is this. Inclusive role of church in relating to Adventist public officials. We see public or state officials in our church, we need to be inclusive in our church functioning. Secondly, balancing and posing a neutral position on political officials in our church. Political officials to be treated as ambassadors of the church, not as a enemy of the church because they are involved in politics, or not to be taken advantage of them. Pray for them and pray with them. In conclusion, let the church be inclusive, balanced and diverse in relating to the church members as political or state officials, because Isaiah begins with the vision of God, that is, the whole earth is full of the Lord's glory. So we need to be inclusive. Secondly, mission to the nations outside Israel becomes explicit in the life of Jesus. And Ellen White goes on to say, have your thoughts that you dare not express, that you may one day sit in deliberative and legislative council and help to enact laws for the nation. There is nothing wrong in these aspirations. So, as a church, when we say being inclusive, diverse and balanced, from the concept of church and state, it simply brings out in my paper is to say that we need to be inclusive, however, be cautious. We need to be balanced in how we relate with the public officials, not for taking any advantage over them. Lastly, to be diverse. We need to be diverse in our thinking in terms of how we support the governance, because we are also asked to play a part for the social upliftment through our religious worldview. Thank you, and God bless.